It's like I said, it's a short documentary. It's about those guys that do the courtroom sketch art. There's a very prolific sketch artist who lives in Fort Worth. His name is Gary Myrick, and he has for the past 40 years sketched all the famous and obscure and everything in between, all the trials that happen mostly in Texas. And he's just got this huge trove of these drawings that I found that he had. And it's a long story, but there's an interesting dynamic between the careers of the courtroom sketch artists and the advent of cameras in the courtrooms. And so once the cameras start coming into the courtrooms, it sort of really affected the courtroom sketch artists being able to work in the courtrooms. So right now there's only federal courts, and those are sort of diminishing too, but there's only a few places where the artists can go. So they went from a very, as Gary would say, sort of the halcyon days of courtroom sketch art to what is right now, I think, an increasingly fading, diminishing career. So, or art form even. And that's really what the film is about. It's just sort of tracing both the art form and Gary's career.
How did you find him?
I learned about Gary. I read, I think it was 2011. There was a piece in Texas Monthly by John Spong, and he had done like a profile of Gary, and it was really interesting. Sort of the way it was written. I think Gary's personality and also there's sort of a sense of humor in his work, but also a deep humanism. It's sort of difficult to explain unless you've seen the drawings, but there was really something there. So that same night when I read that article, I wrote Gary and asked if he'd be willing to do a film, and yeah, that's how it started.
What got you interested? Are you into art yourself? Do you collect sketches? Because I know they're sold on eBay now, and give to the collector like this.
Yeah, no, I had no experience with sketch art at all. It was an article that I just sort of ran into. It just happened that before I did this film, maybe a year before that, I'd done another film just by accident about an Iraqi artist who was a very big name in Iraq, and then he had to go into exile, and he was living here, and he was going through that same kind of obscurity that Gary is facing. So this was sort of an unintentional follow-up to the first film I made. But yeah, since the film has come out, Gary's been approached by the Library of Congress, and they're interested in acquiring his work for the Library of Congress. So it's been some really good news there, and he'd be the third courtroom sketch artist that would have his work on sort of permanent. Well, I don't know if it's display, but just sort of in the permanent collection of the Library of Congress. Wow. So, yeah.
Did he get to keep all his sketches from every case that he worked in?
Well, no, that's a good question. If you go into his house, there's literally just stacks and stacks of sketches. And he's got this great memory. He can go to any random one and tell you exactly sort of the names, the details of the case. There might be something from a Dallas school desegregation trial from like the 80s, and he'll tell you every little thing about it. But no, what he has there, which is just again stacks and stacks, probably thousands of drawings, he said is just really a fraction. There's so many that were over the years that were either sold or that were lost. At some point in his career, he said that after they would shoot it, after the TV cameras would shoot it, they'd just sort of crumble it up and throw it over their shoulders. So starting at that point, he asked that he'd keep it, and of course he retained all the rights. So I think it's like maybe a third or half of, I don't want to misquote him, but I think somewhere around there that he's retained. Yeah. But it's just really, when you look at it, it sort of hits you that it's a really interesting slice of Texas history. There's just so much there. There's so many trials and so many little moments that he was able to capture because there was no other visual record of what was going on in those rooms. So. And a lot of that comes out in Gary's personality and in his aesthetic and his sensibilities. He doesn't really go for the big dramatic gestures of what you would expect of like a big finger pointing or like a prosecutor kind of turning that way. But there are all these little subtle moments that tell you a lot about what's going on and sort of his perception of even maybe a little bit of subtext of what's going on in a scene. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous. There's one where there's a chalkboard. Well, there's a chart sort of the size of this chalkboard. I mean, maybe it's like 10 feet long, and it's just this linguistics chart. And this was from the trial of Cullen Davis, where they had videotaped him putting a hit out on his judge. And this was on, you know, they had the tape, they had a secret tape, they even had somebody pose as a dead body inside of a trunk, and they showed him that picture. But then they have a linguistic expert that said that do the judge doesn't necessarily mean kill the judge. So they sort of explained that through this long chart, and they got him off the hook.
He still managed to beat that, right?
Yeah, he did. He did.
Is that why he referred to it as the OJ trial of Texas
Oh, it
or
was.
whatever?
Yeah, he was. If I'm remembering what he said correctly, he was the richest person in U.S. history to be tried for capital murder. Yeah. Up until that point.
His wife had that big rich bitch necklace.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
diamond
yeah,
necklace,
that's right.
It said rich bitch.
Oh, yeah,
on it.
yeah.
That's right.
He was played by Peter Strauss in a TV movie.
I
I was in Florida when that aired.
I hadn't
was
seen
telling
that.
everybody about Texas, what that meant to the state of Texas, that trial.
Oh, my mom used to love to drive by the house during the trial when we were kids. Oh, and that's the house. Oh, who's by there today? Is he there
And it
today?
was
right.
a restaurant for years in
Yeah.
Fort Worth, yeah.
Yeah.
And a little bit of like going back, I get a little bit of history on this is that when in the film you'll see, but Gary sort of traces the modern courtroom artists to the reporters who, like during the Civil War era, they were able to draw as well as, you know, write. So they'd go sit out on the battlefield, sketch what's going on, and then write a story about it, and that would appear in the newspaper. And that's sort of where, you know, where some of that tradition comes from. And when they did allow cameras into the or I should say when cameras first were developed, they were allowed into the courtrooms. So they'd bring him in, you know, in the 20s or, you know, in the 30s. And it's a long and complicated history, but just to simplify it, it was in the trial of Richard Bruna Hauptmann for the kidnapping of the Limburg baby. This happened in 1935. And if you go online, you could actually find footage of it, which is really fascinating. But during this trial, it became a huge circus, and this guy was eventually executed with the electric chair. But because the cameras were there, and because they had so many people there, and everybody knew it was going to end up on a film reel somewhere, everybody, and not just for this one trial, but it represented a trend where everybody was sort of showboating for the camera. They knew they were being filmed, so they had extra swagger. The prosecutor they said like from before they started taping trials, people would just come into normal clothes to wearing their Sunday best to like every trial. And it became a huge circus. So then after that, they, not banned, but they recommended, the American Bar Association recommended the removal of cameras. Another thing was that they had to have these long cords. They had these flash powder pans that were really loud, and they were very disruptive to the court proceedings. So they recommended that they remove those. And then after they removed them little by little, state by state, they started losing cameras in the courtroom, and that ushered in sort of a golden era for courtroom artists. But yeah, I can go on and on, but if
How did
there's...
you get started?
How did Gary get started?
Yeah.
He, you know, he was self-taught. I talk about this a little bit in the film too, but one of his heroes is a guy named Howard Brody, who was one of the best courtroom sketch artists. He did, you know, the Nixon trials, the Manson trials, just sort of during that golden era that I was describing earlier. Brody started as a Vietnam War journalist. He would sketch wartime goings on, and then he started working with Walter Cronkite. So all of his sketches were on the evening news, and that's what sort of inspired Gary. But he was self-taught. He said he got his education working between the volcano and the gunfights at Six Flags, where he was doing sketches of people. You know, he says it's in 100-degree heat with kids trying not to throw up, sitting there still while he's like sketching them. And he started that when he was 16 or 17, and then when he was at a very young age, he was 21 years old. He was hired. Man, don't quote me on this, but I think it's ABC News, the local station of ABC News at the time. But one of the affiliates anyway hired him as their art director. So, and you'll see pictures of this too. So when they had the night's lineup, you know, and they have like coming up, you know, there'd be Gunsmoke and a few other shows, and he'd literally draw out these big placards, and the camera would just sort of go from one to one.
Yeah.
So he did everything like that, all the graphic stuff for the TV stations, and then from there he became the courtroom sketch artist.
Now, it says in your video he's now a security guard. Is that because he just didn't have any other skills besides sketch artist?
It's kind of a long story, but he there's a lot of things that he tried. Once the profession slowly started to die down, and he still gets called, but it's not nearly as frequent. He used to work every day. There were some days where he'd do multiple trials, even like sort of they'd fly him on a jet from one place to another to do a trial. And so he went from that to like very quick sort of 10-minute arraignments that he's doing right now. And during that time, there was a lot of different things that he tried, and he did have a lot of other jobs that he went through, but he eventually just settled on a security guard. I think there's something that he likes about that too, but it's not his profession, obviously. But he settled into that, and he may he may be able to, because of some of the things that have happened, he may be able to retire from there, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Travis. Travis, just tell us the background.
Well,
tell us about your film.
tell me about this 6-minute opus.
Exactly.
Liability came out of a lot of discussions that Jeremy and I had after and during, while he had a short film that was making the circuit a couple of years ago, and just us commenting on what got into film festivals, what didn't get into film festivals. Everything could be 45 minutes long, but yet nothing over 15 minutes. There's all these rumors you hear from by Southwest or Sundance or any of them, like, well, they'll never look at anything over this long. So we just kind of we were just talking and riffing a lot about that. We do lots of little shorts, not for festival or really anyone else but our own pleasure. But this came out of a lot of our just love for comedy, love for satire, and then there's sort of a natural absurdism that we like to play with, whether it be just action or anachronisms or things like that. And so that's kind of how the script came. I love puppets, and I will find any excuse to use a puppet. In fact, the puppet in this is from a previous series of shorts about a children's Christian show in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Where Jeremy played the preacher who goes live and for this kid's show, and literally just seconds into it, a stagehand walks on and gives him terrible, terrible news that he has to push through, but he keeps pushing through each episode, and this puppet was his counterpart as his character got sicker from an unknown disease. There seemed to be no cure. In the 80s. So darkness is something we like, and we like to play around the line there. But other than that, though, it's a lot about just the format. Where do, I was a theater major, and playwriting was one of my things, and this one-act festival was a way to experiment, was a way to fail, was a way to try things out. And I was going to these festivals and watching these shorts, and I was going, that's not really a short film. That's one act out of a screenplay, which I'm pretty sure you've got 25 bound copies with a synopsis in the trunk of your car. Although they were beautiful and the acting was incredible, the budgets were outrageous in some of them. I mean, and of course, they all had connections with someone in LA or something like that, but none of them were trying to play with, you've got this format that no one's going to judge you the way they would judge a film, so try something, just see what works and what doesn't. It's all for, the love of filmmaking. So, and that's where, it's literally that, what I just said is longer than the film.
That's true.
So anyway, and it just plays with stuff we like to riff about. 80s stuff, 70s movie stuff, and conventions and things.
We grew up in children's church, and there's a mix of you know, we got puppetry in children's church. My parents were children's pastors, and they did all that. And then a little mix of Jim Henson in there. And
What is a puppet?
Yeah.
If you remove the puppet, is it just a hand, or can you still become emotionally invested in the hand?
how deep can you get about puppets?
Yeah, how deep can you get? And that's where the sort of the existentialism and the absurdism, come to be.
Which one of you was performing the main puppet?
Jeremy is the puppet, yes.
Which we reveal. There's you see the puppeteer and the puppet in the movie. So it's accessing there's a character playing a puppet, and Travis, like, I wanted to back out at the last minute on the puppet because it's like, I don't know, I've played around for years with puppets, but I don't necessarily feel I'm skilled. And he talked me into it, got me into it. It was one of the most fun I've ever had on a set because you're acting completely blind. You're completely trusting someone else to say no, and it's all in the eye line. The eye line plays everything.
Yeah.
Is that your voice too?
Yeah.
Were you doing the voice live or did you dub it in movie?
We did both live and then.
Yeah, but we ADR'd everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ADR'd almost everything. Mostly because of the squeaky wheels on the cart that he's getting dragged on.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the other thing you mentioned, the picture at the end. We kind of want to create a piece that the joke is yours to tell. Once you start to deconstruct this story, it gets more ridiculous. Like, is this just the way they live their life? I mean, how did they meet? Is this some weird sick fetish? I mean, and they took it to such a terrible degree. So, loosely based on a neighbor of mine, I have to say. I just realized where I was going.
It's a scary neighbor.
Sorry.
So is the follow-up going to be CSI Puppet?
No, I would love to. There was lots of talk about doing how they met, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No,
now. That's not going to happen now. So I think it'll just live as it does. I'm sure we'll find another excuse to bring that blue puppet out. We're working on something now, and God help the puppet if we do involve it in any way possible. So.
How many hours of shooting went into your film?
We shot overnight, about 10.
10 hours.
Yeah, it was 7 till 7. We got everyone to donate a 12-hour, the crew to do 12 hours.
So we got the whole thing, both locations done?
Yeah, it was, yes, we booked the house we found, of course, ahead of time. That's not true. Then we shot the bar scene a separate weekend, and that was in about 3 hours. And that was actually at not Texas Land and Cattle, but Love and Warren, Texas, out in Frisco. Yeah, which is a restaurant, music venue.
I mean, were you there after hours?
No, you know what? They didn't. No, they just let us show up early. They were so, again, just supportive. We had some money, said we'll pay whichever waiter, whoever has to come in early to let us in. They said, no problem, we open up at 8 a.m., so anytime after 8, where our manager's there, go ahead, this is where we're gonna set up, we told them, and they let us do it. And they said, just be out by 11, that's when the football crowd comes in, we have a brunch set up, and we were almost out by 12, but still, but they couldn't have been nicer. They let us totally take over. Didn't charge us a dime, didn't, put out some chips and salsa and drinks for us. So. For the crew.
Bloody Marys at the end.
Really good Bloody Marys at the end, yeah. So, but we find that a lot of times if you just tell them what it's about here in town, restaurants, everybody's really, really supportive,
Your blonde actress, tell us about her.
Amber is she's a local actress here in town. She's actually now working in Pennsylvania. She does crew as well. I knew her through Jeremy, and she's very idiosyncratic. I always thought she's just an interesting person. Her voice is very interesting, and so I knew that.
Naturally talented actor.
Very naturally. She doesn't. she doesn't. It's really effortless in the truest sense. She puts almost no effort into it. But that's what cue cards are for. And ADR. But she just had this this interesting kind of a look that I thought would be, again, just being armless at the end of a whole tale would be funny.
Did you know her ahead of time, or did you audition?
No, I knew her ahead of time. She also works on crew. She's like a PA and second AD and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Team, will you tell us what you feel about being in the Texas show and the Dallas Video Festival with your film?
Yep. I think these guys said it best. I'm very, very excited. I grew up in the area, and there's, like everybody says, there is so much talent here, and so many, you've made so many great friends working here, and it's just an honor, like they said. And I also, with this being a documentary, I also like being able to tell, stories of people, of things that are going on just in our neighborhoods. And there's so much to unearth, and it's, again, just very exciting to be able to present that to the communities where these stories were taking place. So just very excited. And I've never had anything at the VideoFest, so
Cool.
this will be great. Yeah.
Cool.
Is Travis coming and hasn't been on the screen before?
Did Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gary will be there. He's also really excited,
that's
and
cool.
we haven't really. So this was commissioned by the New York Times, so it came online, and it was an incredible experience just because it was we had the opportunity for it to be seen by so many people, all online, and then we hadn't really done very many festivals. We had it released there, and then we did one film festival before this, and this will be the second one. And the other one that we did was out of town. So this will be the first time that he'll be there to see it on the big screen, as well as myself, really. So, yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm shooting another documentary. The format still remains to be seen. It's about a company called LIABILITY, and this is another Texas. It's a Texas story with international implications, but there's a company called LIABILITY that was a secure email, encrypted email company that had about 410,000 users, and one of their users was Edward Snowden. And so when those revelations were made last summer in June, a little bit after that, there was a request for LIABILITY's SSL keys, which a lot of this stuff is very, very technically complicated. So I don't want to go into it here, but there was a request for their SSL keys, and there was a little bit of back and forth, and the owner of LIABILITY, as an act of his conscience and to his credit, shut down his company rather than to cede his SSL keys. So this would happen without warning. So overnight, the whole LIABILITY website went down, and there was only a letter to all the users saying, I'm sorry, but this is something that I had to do. And when this happened, there's very little that you can tell publicly, because a lot of this stuff is happening. A lot of it is still. A lot of it is going on sort of under wraps at this point. So there's little that he can say publicly, but since then he's been to court and all this has been made public. So really what's going on now, that's really sort of the background of it, but they're working on new technologies to make encrypted email sort of more secure. And this has a lot of connotations. It's not really a domestic thing, but it helps people all around the world just to be able to communicate safely. It's for doctors to be able to communicate with their patients, for lawyers to communicate with their clients, in a lot of war-torn areas in the world, for dissidents to be able to communicate. And it's sort of a very big story in that sense, and it's really moved beyond the history of LIABILITY, whatever it may have been. It just sort of underscores the need for private communications and the restoration of privacy, because what we've done with technology is we've just sort of made everything available, but there's been up until recently, up until the past year, less emphasis on privacy, on things working privately. So there's a whole movement towards that now, and I'm documenting a little part of that story. So we'll see where it goes.
And Travis, what are you working on now?
Jeremy and I have a script. We're just fine-tuning. It's based upon an app, a hookup app.
Hey,
Nice.
for puppets?
As I said, God forbid any puppet involved in this. We actually think it's a sweet story. Again, we're just, we find humor in the human condition, no matter how desperate it is. And this was just an app we both heard about for men, and I thought, man.
My brother had a very funny encounter and story that we were adapting into.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Glenda, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Not that I know it.
It is. But again, it's just an excuse to try some things. We also watched this, and we didn't know how to approach it. And then we watched this amazing history of filmmaking series on Netflix.
Story of film.
The story of film.
Oh, yeah.
It just, and we thought, let's do a little tribute to all that with this horrible story. So if that gets in, that'll be something.
Wow. All right.
But again, we find it, and if you look at a lot of our stuff, there's always this character called Wallet Spooks. This is a character that Jeremy came up with, and we've used him for various things. And it's sort of this parallel universe that he exists in, and he's the person. The puppet is Wallet Spooks. That's the actual guy. We have other shorts and other things where Wallet Spooks, and this will also be, Wallet Spooks will be the protagonist in this. And he's just a guy who
Very earnest.
very earnest, is completely not self-aware, kind of throws back to those great, I love the early Steve Martin characters. Steve Carell plays, they have no sense of where the boundaries are, where the lines are. And I just find that, I think that's just who we are in our lives, you know? And so anyway, that's actually what we are gearing up now to probably knock out and have ready around the spring or so. I think we'll be done.
Well, we have about 5 minutes. Is there anything extra that you want to tell?
I have some quotes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got some quotes. These are just in case you guys don't want to do your own.
Go ahead.
I just thought I'd make it easy for you. All right, this is from the Dallas Times-Herald.
Oh, of course.
I arrived 5 minutes late and missed it. This is from the San Diego Journal. I had something else on my mind. This is from the Boston Bugle. I thought this is nice. Bring something to read. 50% off all fabric glue. That's just from Hobby Lobby. Oh, and don't care, don't know. That was my mom. But, all right. No, we appreciate all y'all's support. Thank you.